AJ, this podcast, this is for middle and high school students and their teachers. These are busy people. They don't have time for fluff. So we're going to jump right into this. We always like to start off with the same question. And it's a question that actually our listeners want the answer to. And it's also going to help set the tone for the rest of the interview. So with that, AJ, pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
I would say an absolute no for me.
Wow. Okay. You're going to have a little bit of work ahead of you to win some of our listeners over because I'm assuming they're all like me and love pineapple on pizza, but that's okay.
Really? Are you any other fruits on pizza, or is it just a pineapple specific?
No, that's a fair question. I like to ask it because I know it's a little divisive or divisive. No, I don't think so. Maybe I would probably eat avocado on pizza because I eat avocado on everything. But no, I don't think so. Do you have a favorite pizza?
I do. I have my go-to is red onions, green peppers, and hot peppers.
Okay. I would eat that.
That's my go-to. Always has been and always will be.
That's fair. As long as it doesn't have green olives or anchovies, then I'll pretty much eat anything, but that's okay.
Same.
Cool. So AJ, for some background context, who are you and what are you doing for work right now?
Yeah, so my name is AJ. I come from a background in politics. I went to school for public policy, but right now I am running an organization called Palette, and we help people who are working in jobs that they want to switch career paths but aren't sure where to go. We help them figure out where to go and how to get the skills they need to get to that new job.
Okay, so that's pretty interesting and something that I think we should start this conversation with. Obviously, if you went to school and spent some time in the world of public policy and poli-sci, now you're working in an industry that are helping people upskill and reskill to find new employment. Can you speak a little bit to your kind of career path and what that looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. My career path, if you had asked me when I was 16 or 17 years old, where are you going to be, a couple years from now, I doubt that I would have had any idea to answer that I would be running my own organization and that this was what we would be doing. When I was younger, I didn't know a lot about what I wanted to do when I grew up, but I knew that I was very interested in politics. I was always watching the news. I was really passionate about justice and power and understanding those things. So that's what I decided to go to school for, and kind of thought I'd figure out the rest as I went. I worked in politics for a little bit when I graduated in the provincial government, and I dealt with a lot of big public policy issues like education and training and jobs.
Right.
And that was where I got really interested in some of those things. And then when I left, I decided I wanted to keep doing stuff like that. I wanted to keep solving problems and making a difference in my community and in the world, but maybe through a different way. And that was where I started to explore the idea of entrepreneurship to build things that were going to give back and make an impact, as opposed to just building a business. So I've built now a couple organizations that had different missions, but all of them were focused on seeing a problem in the community or in the world and trying to figure out a way to solve it.
Solving a real need, right? And so that's actually a great segue to talk about the hog. So this is something that we like to do in each interview, where something that I stole from my blueprint at our meetings to make things a bit more efficient. In our agenda, we've started labeling each item with the amount of time that we think we're going to speak to that, and then either labeling it as an update, a discussion, a decision, or once a meeting we get to have the hog, where you have a bit more time to speak passionately to something that you think is important for that week's meeting. And I talked a little bit beforehand, and it's related to what you just said, and maybe you can speak to it from your experiences in your own career and what you're learning at Palette. But a lot of the students that are listening to this are going to be high school students and are starting to think about the decisions about what's going to happen to them after high school. And many of them are going to pursue post-secondary education, many are not. But for those that are considering their options after high school, whether it's post-secondary or otherwise, can you speak a little bit to maybe easing students' fears around, don't worry so much about the program that you're picking. It's not necessarily going to determine your life path. Like you just spoke to, you studied political science and public policy because that's what you're interested in at the time. but it's obviously led you down a different journey where you're able to take it all in and pivot along the way. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was listening to some of your other podcasts and I heard the phrase, don't worry so much about passion, focus on purpose. And I
Right.
think that when you're thinking about how to build your next steps in terms of what you're going to do and how to find your direction, I couldn't come up with better advice, I think, than that. When you think about what it is that you love and you care about and that moves you to act in a big picture way, what is the stuff that, even if you weren't assigned it in school, what would you be doing on the weekends? What would you be learning about? What would you be reading about anyway? For me, I was always watching the news. I was always reading the newspaper. I was always paying attention to those things. So that was really what moved me, was this feeling of I had this broader purpose of doing something to help people, but I didn't really know much more than that. And so when you go to school, when you pick, if you're going to go to post-secondary or if you're going to just go straight into work, there's this sort of feeling after high school, like it's this massive sort of cliff that you have to jump off of. And once you pick where you're going to jump into, like, that's it. And the reality is that's just not true, even if we wanted it to be anymore. The world moves so fast. Even if you think you know exactly what you want to do, there's a good chance that, in 5-10 years, you'll find yourself doing something else. That's just the nature of the world. And so that can be kind of scary, but that can also be really exciting, because it means that you can never not undo something when it comes to your career, and you can always change your paths as you go through it. So the best thing to do, I think, is to think about, if you could describe, don't worry about what job you want to do or even what field you want to do. Think about, what gets me up in the morning? What is that sort of purpose that I care about, the thing that I want to do or I want to think about, even when no one's making me do or think about it?
Right.
And how can I explore that further? And, for me, that was politics and government and going to school and learning about those things. For other people, it can be lots of other things. But I think, that when I look back on my career, that's the thread. I have all these weird things that I did. And if you look at it just from, you did this job and you did this job and you did just this job, it doesn't make a ton of sense. But if you look at it from the thread of, what was your purpose in each of these jobs and what were you trying to accomplish in them, you can see that I'm trying to help people. That's my big purpose. And so I think, when you're thinking about what to do in school next, focus on that and be confident that as long as you're clear on what that is, or as you go through and you figure that out, that your path will make itself obvious to you.
Yeah, no kidding. And I'm so privileged to be able to talk to so many of these young people today that already have identified kind of a purpose that they're really passionate about. Many people haven't, and that's okay, because you're going to learn from experience. But there's so many things going on right now, from wanting to help with climate change to the world of politics, that just whatever you think you might be interested in, spend some time, read up on it, and see if that triggers something you want to learn more, right?
And I would also say, I think that the clearer you are on that, the more you can take anything you're doing and turn it into an opportunity to drive that purpose forward. So, I always had these, big ambitions about helping people and helping my communities. But when I first graduated school, it wasn't like I just went into work in government and I just sort of had this perfect opportunity to do that. I was working at restaurants. I was working in offices, answering phones and filing papers. And, you're going to do a lot of these sort of little jobs, and it's easy to feel like they're kind of a waste of time, or, they're just sort of bumps in the road before you get to the real thing you're doing. But if you know the impact you want to have and your purpose and what you care about, you can usually find ways to do that in any job you're doing. If climate change is really important to you, you might be working, in a restaurant job or in some menial office job, but maybe you can be thinking about how they're dealing with their waste and encourage your manager to try new approaches to recycling or different things like that. There's always opportunity when you know that big picture of who you are and what you're trying to do. Then any job becomes an opportunity to push that forward if you think about it right.
100%. And it's funny that you mentioned that. There was another podcast I was listening to recently. It's called Ologies, and they interview all different types of professionals in the world of science. And they were talking about, this was an oceanologist, so oceanology. And she's talking about how so many different types of jobs are important to help protect the ocean. You don't have to just be an ocean scientist. You could be someone who really enjoys writing and is good at communication, because honestly, a big part of climate change, and I'm pretty sure David Attenborough just signed up for Instagram. He just broke the record of like fastest to 1 million followers, which is great. And he said that, climate change is now a communications problem. So you don't just have to be the scientist to solve that problem, right? There's so many different ways depending on what your purpose and how that aligns with your skills for you to be able to get there.
That's right. Another great example that's really close to the work I'm doing right now is so one of the programs that we run help people who want to work in tech jobs, but don't come from tech backgrounds, get into them. So, tech is a really exciting space right now. A lot of people want to work in it. And we've sort of led people to believe that you have to be a computer engineer or a software developer or, have this big science or engineering background to work in that space. But the reality is, unless you're actually building a technology product, there are a lot of different jobs and a lot of different skills and a lot of different people that are needed to make any tech company or anything tech work, right? And so a lot of what my organization is doing right now is helping people who are working in retail or hospitality or restaurants or different things where they're dealing with people every day and they're selling products every day. They're just not selling tech products. We're helping them get some new skills and then get jobs in tech to work in sales. And most people just would never think, oh, I'm good at sales, I'm good at communications, I'm good at people, that could take me down this tech career path. But like you said, whatever you're passionate about, you don't need to necessarily have those exact skills for the one job. There's hundreds of jobs in any space, and probably a job for you depending on what you're interested in and what you want to be doing in it.
Can you speak a little bit more to that? So obviously the program you just talked about is kind of the sales program, if we can call it that. You can help people who may have an interest or may have some of the underlying skills they need to be successful, and help them transition to all the opportunities that present themselves in technology. Because like you just said, there are a lot of opportunities in tech, especially in Toronto and in Canada. And you don't have to be the back-end engineer to be in that world. There's like so many of these companies need strong, qualified sales professionals to be able to help move that product that they're building, right? So what are some other programs that Palette is working on, or where are the skills that are going to be needed in the next 5 years in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's interesting. We talk to all kinds of companies under the sun, and we're talking to agriculture companies that are looking at building new smart greenhouses. We talk to, car manufacturers that are looking at how to incorporate more robots onto their assembly lines. We talk to all these companies, and there's sort of two things that we hear: that there's a lot of new technology that they're working on that's constantly changing, and they don't have the right people with the right skills to keep up with that. So I think anything, on that side is really exciting. But we also hear the same things over and over again across the board around smart business people, communications people, strategists, people who just know how to think and know how to think differently, and who can go into any kind of environment and are sort of broad thinkers who can think creatively and problem solve no matter where they are. And I think that, while most companies are looking for someone to have a little bit of technical expertise in whatever it is the job that they're doing, the biggest skill set that they're all looking for is that what you call resilience and adaptability, for people who can change, who can change quickly, who can learn things quickly, and who aren't afraid of trying new things. And the reason why they value that is because that's how the world works now, right? In the economy and in offices, things are always changing. And, you just don't have the luxury of being unwilling to change or unwilling to learn. So I think, as much as you can pick, yes, I'm interested in this particular thing or that particular thing, the real muscle that I think everybody needs to be developing right now is that ability to adapt and to just be open to change and navigate it.
Yeah. If there ever was a silver bullet, it's going to be that resilience and ability to adapt. Do you have any advice, AJ, or any ideas about how students or anybody in general can build that muscle? Is it just being aware that that is something that is going to be necessary to be successful in your career? Or is it just, not pigeonholing yourself on this one thing and only doing that one thing and trying different things and being able to learn and fail along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the generation of listeners that are listening right now, the 16, 17-year-olds out there, you guys have grown up in a world that has been changing constantly. Every year it looks a little different than it did the year before. And I think that as hard as I can only imagine that must be when you're growing up, the good thing is that you are so much better prepared than so many of the other generations that came before you to navigate change. It's in your blood. It's in your DNA. It's funny to try to imagine how to explain to someone who's a teenager right now how to be adaptable. I think they could probably better explain that to me, because they probably don't even realize
it's all they know.
Right? Going from in-person classes to online classes, going from being with your friends to being at home, like the amount of change that has been navigated and the resiliency that's come from that is really incredible for this group of the students in this generation. What I say is really important when you're building out that muscle is it's about how you talk yourself through the experience of discomfort and the experience of change. So we're all always faced with these situations of, everything's changing. I don't know what's happening. It's kind of scary. It's really uncomfortable. And surviving that isn't the same as navigating it. Yep. When you talk about navigating it, it's about being able to have this sort of emotional control, self-control, and self-talk to step back and say, okay, here's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening right now. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? And what is it about this situation that I can control?
Yep.
And what is it about this situation that I can't control? And for me, when I'm faced with these kinds of this kind of uncertainty, the way that I've built that strength is by really practicing to separate what I can control and really focusing on how to take action on those things.
Yeah.
And really separating that from the things that I can't control, and just really letting those things go and really trying not to get so tied up in the unknowns that I get distracted from the things that I can control. And I think that that's important when you're talking about really big picture stuff, like trying to understand how to navigate a world during a pandemic or global or climate change or things like that.
Yeah.
But, it's the exact same process when you're, sitting in an office and your boss comes up to you and says, hey, we need you to build this new website for our company, and you don't know how to code. You still have to go through that same process of saying, okay, whoa, this is intense. I'm going to have to do something totally different. There's a lot of unknown here, but what is it that needs to happen? What is it that I can control in this situation? What is it that I can't control in this situation? And how can I manage both of those things so that I can get as much done as I can do?
I love that so much. Yeah. Yeah. And a big part of the reason that people interact with our products in My Blueprint is the digital portfolio component of it. So we preach reflection all the time. And it's so important for students to be able to also build that muscle, be able to reflect. And like you said, focus or think about what you can control and what you can't control and how you're going to be able to solve that problem. So I want to keep talking about skills a little bit. And obviously you've just talked about resilience and adaptability and willingness to be able to figure it out, right? I saw that you guys are hiring right now. I think it was a marketing and communications role, something like that, right? So somebody applying for Palette, what does that look like? Is it traditional, look for the job posting on Indeed and submit the cover letter resume? Or how does somebody stand out and actually get AJ's attention to be able to have an interview and be considered for this role?
Yeah. So you're asking me, like, what is it, taking all of these big concepts of what employers are looking for now as an employer, how might I sort of, those things jump out to me from my candidate's perspective? Or
that, I guess one of the things I'm trying to stress to students, for many jobs, you're just going to, click apply, custom make your cover letter for that role. But you know, you're probably for the role you're hiring, you're going to get hundreds of resumes. So I want students to recognize if there's a role that you're intentional about, that you really want, to go above and beyond, right? So if you figure out AJ is the one hiring for this role, you know, find her on LinkedIn, find her email, find something she's passionate about, find a way to connect with her that the other 99 students aren't doing, so that, you know, they stand out in front of you, and you're going to remember that name and that resume as opposed to everybody else.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's it, you know. So like when you hire, when you put out a job posting, you get generally at least 100 resumes without breaking much of a sweat. And because there are a lot of people out there who are just sending a resume and that's it. And they're just kind of sending out hundreds of resumes a day to any job they can. And you can kind of tell when someone's doing that, because there's just not much of it doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at the resume and you look at the job. There's no personalization. There's no explanation as to sort of why they think they're the right fit. And so, you know, what most, I think, employers do is get used to just rifling through people who haven't done anything. And it's not about just going above and beyond to stand out, but even personalizing an email, you know, those little things can be really important. For me, yeah, I think, you know, when people email me directly and sort of say, I'd like to apply for this job, and here's why I would really love to work in your organization, that really means a lot to me. So I think a lot of people, a lot of job seekers, they think about selling themselves in terms of why they're good. But counterintuitively, I think that a lot of employers want to hear that person say why they think the company is good. And that's not about, you know, sort of an ego compliment or something like that. It's about really showing your passion and your interest and your understanding of what the organization is trying to do. As an employer, if I'm going through hundreds of resumes of people who don't really care about my organization and are just trying to send out quantities of, you know, a certain quantity of resumes a day, and I'm just another job opening that they're blasting their resume to, you know, what actually stands out is someone who has taken the time to better understand my organization. You know, we talk a lot. So at Palette, like you were saying, one of the programs we're running right now is a sales program. And so become a much bigger expert in sales than I ever thought I would be. And one of the things people talk about a lot is, you know, when you're selling something to another person, you know, people think you need to explain the product and, you know, here are all the features of the product and here's what the product can and can't do.
Right.
But the more you actually talk about how well you understand the problem of the person you're trying to sell to, how much you understand the ins and outs of their challenges, if you spend, you know, 80% of your time talking about them and how well you understand them, then it only takes 20% of the time to just say, oh, and this product would be a good fit for that. And, you know, I don't need to know what's involved. You know me so well, you know, if you're telling me that that's what I should do, then that's what I should do. Whereas if you spend 80% of the time trying to talk about the product, you're like, I don't know. It doesn't mean a lot to me. You're just one more product out there.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot when I think about applying for jobs and selling yourself, right? We talk a lot in our programs about how you need to see yourself as a bit of like the product you're selling. And so if that's the case, then you should be going into any employer and really focusing on what is their need? How is what you're selling going to solve their problems? If you spend a lot of time talking about that and being really clear on that, then it becomes a no-brainer, I think, for the employer to say, you know what, you understand this job, you understand this problem, you understand me. Of course I'm going to hire you. Like if you understand it so well, then you're going to understand how to do it.
That's such a cool way that you brought those two things together. And I couldn't agree more. So, I mean, we're hiring for a few different roles right now at My Blueprint as well. And I've created somewhat of a rubric that includes our values. So that when I'm talking to the person, I'm not just saying, yeah, I really like this person. I can look back at my notes and see what they have said and what their experience is and how that relates to our values. And probably the one that I place the most weight on, one of our values is, you know, we want to be here, or wants to be here. So for that person who has taken the time to really understand our business and do some research and ask really interesting questions about what we're doing and where we're going, they're going to get so many more points on that, you know, rubric than the person who's just, like you said, mail merged 100 resumes to 100 different companies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. I mean, you know, there's been a couple people who have reached out to me on LinkedIn for other jobs that we've posted that they're too late or whatever it was. And they've kept in touch with me. And as new jobs have been posted, they've reached out to see if there's an opportunity and fit, and subsequently applied for other jobs. And that interest and that persistence, and it's a balance, I think. And this is something to stress when we talk about reaching out to people directly or following up with them. You have to find that right balance between being engaged and being a little annoying, right? And emailing more than once a week is probably a little much. So, but finding that nice balance of just staying engaged with people. If there's a company you're really interested in, play the long game. Don't be afraid to do that. And I think that's an important mindset, coming back to some of the other career conversations we're having, is, play the long game in your career. If there's somewhere you want to go, don't look just at the job that you're being offered today. There have been lots of not dream jobs that I've had to take to get to what a dream job would be. And there's been lots of jobs that I've taken thinking I'd only be there for a short period of time, but that I've been able to, turn into a job that I would want to stay at for a longer period of time. And I think, a lot of times what I see young people do is feel like, the first job they take out of school or the first big job that they take out of school, that is sort of, they're going to get stuck there, and that defines them. And so don't think so short. Think, what is the next 5 years? What do I want to do broadly? And how does this fit into that?
So your career very much is a long game, and the same thing with your network, guys. We've talked about this on a few different podcasts as well, but you don't want to be burning bridges. You don't want to be doing something that the wrong way or for the wrong reasons, because people are going to remember it and they're going to come back in your life. The world is as big as it is. It's a small place. So always be playing the long game and adding value and doing the right things. Right. Okay, Jay, so let's transition to something a bit more fun. We're going to do some rapid fire questions for you. Okay.
Okay.
So what's a life skill that you weren't taught in high school, but that you wish you were?
A life skill. I mean, I think a lot of things relating to money. I wish that I had been taught how to do my taxes and how to budget better. And, there's a lot of things as you get older and more as you get older and older, that you have to do to deal with money and finances. And I don't know about you, but I don't really remember ever having classes in high school that taught me any of those things. So
no, and there's still a long way to go. Yeah, if I had learned about compound interest when I was 18, assuming I would have listened, it would have been very beneficial, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a billboard. Everyone's going to see it. You can write one thing on it. What would it say?
Take care of each other. I think in this world right now, I wish I could come up with something more exciting than that. But I think that if we could just all take better care of each other, that'd be pretty exciting as a starting point.
I think that's perfect. I think oftentimes we lose sight of how interconnected this world is and that we're all the same human. So yeah, take care of each other. It's perfect. Okay. IQ, so intelligent quotient, or EQ, emotional quotient. You're an expert when it comes to the skills that our society needs. Which one is it?
Oh, EQ. Absolutely. I think, I'm an EQ person. I'm a people person. And so I think I naturally gravitate towards that. But I would say, realistically, given the way technology and knowledge and things are changing and information is so much more available to us than it's ever been before, having deep sort of book smarts, data smarts, science smarts, like there's huge value for that still. So, if you don't have a strong EQ, that's okay. Yeah. But I think it's those, it's the human elements of what makes us unique: empathy, compassion, listening, understanding. Those are really the things that can't just be replicated by, Google search.
I was going to say, yeah. Especially as technology continues to advance, right? What are the things that humans are innately good at, right? How can we differentiate ourselves? Yeah. Did you have a favorite class in high school growing up, AJ?
I think Western civilizations. So that was where I learned about, how the first politics, how society started and when the first politics and governments took place. And so I think that was what hooked me early on.
Have you read Sapiens, the book?
I haven't actually. Somebody gave it to me to read
Yeah.
my mat leave. And just a note to everyone out there, nobody gets books read on their mat leave. So it's still on my bookshelf.
Yeah, there's probably better gifts for somebody on their mat leave.
Yeah.
It's a big read, but you'd probably find it super interesting. Speaking of books, is there a book that you have read that was maybe super impactful that maybe you wish you would have read before you were 18?
Oh, before I was 18.
Something you wish you got your hands on a little bit earlier, maybe.
Man. Oh, I read such nerdy books now. I'm trying to remember back to what was really meaningful to me.
Could just be the last book that you've really enjoyed.
So I would say, yeah. So for all of my fellow, politics, social justice, nerds out there who might be listening to this podcast, a really interesting book it's a nonfiction called Winners Take All by Anand Giridharadas, is the last book I read. And it just talks about how if you want to change the world, or as people talk about wanting to change the world, we can do lots of really important stuff through our communities and through nonprofits and through other organizations. But at the end of the day, without sort of strong democratic institutions, a strong government thinking about, the most marginalized in society and really using the power of government to improve people's lives, that everything else is kind of just happening on the margins. And that was, that spoke to me because I've been both in government as well as on the outside trying to do good through other means. And, I think it's absolutely true. Both sides are really important. You don't affect change without one or the other. But sometimes, it's easy to get in this sense of, government's all broken and we just need to try and not even work with it. And at the end of the day, if it's broken, the work needs to be to fix it more than anything else. So
Winner takes all?
Winner takes all, yeah.
Okay, we'll link to it in the show notes. That sounds super interesting. Okay, last, I guess, big question for you, last rapid fire one. You're the superintendent of a school board and you're tasked with deciding one competency or one skill that each of your students need to display evidence of in their digital portfolio for them to be able to graduate. What is that skill?
I feel like this is probably a common answer that you get, but I would say empathy. I think that has been a popularized, concept to hear more and more about in the last couple of years. And I think that when you look around at what's happening with the different civil rights movements between Black Lives Matter, Me Too, and the way that people are reacting to some of those things and the personalizing and it's just a real mishmash and mess. And I think that if we had more of an ability as individuals to step back and put ourselves in other people's shoes and really understand, that experience and our roles within other people's experiences and, how we can all work together to make things better. I think there's a lack of space for those conversations that are just so important. And I think that empathy is the number one ingredient to making those kinds of conversations happen and ultimately make those conversations lead to action and change.
100%. Yeah. And it is a popular answer, but for good reasons, right? If we place a priority on empathy, it's gonna be easier to take care of each other as well, right? Any parting words, AJ, maybe something similar to what we talked about with the strong opinions piece for all those change makers that are listening to this? If, this is your soapbox, you have some 16-year-olds listening, anything you want them to hear?
Yeah, sure. So I would say, my strong opinion loosely held. Growing up, I always heard people say, you should try and change the world. You should try and change the world. When I, got into government and then nonprofits and social enterprises, everybody would want to say, well, how are you going to change the world? How are you going to change the world? And my opinion is people don't try and change the world. It's too big. It's really complicated. And the problems are probably so deep that one person, and particularly someone who's just sort of entering the world as an adult, it's a lot. Yeah, I think the better thing to do is focus on changing your neighborhood, changing your community, changing your street, helping the people who need help before you try to understand people who aren't in your community or neighborhood. The people closest to problems are usually the ones best positioned to solve them. So the closer you focus your energy to make a difference, the more likely you are to have a really big, deep, meaningful impact. And once you start small, you can grow, but it's really hard to start big. So that's my opinion. Don't try to change the world. Just try to change your neighborhood and see where you go from there.
What an amazing note to end this on. So AJ, thank you so much for your time today. So many amazing takeaways. I'm going to summarize it all in the show notes. Guys, this is a big one. So take a second to reflect on what you heard, focus on what you can control, and take care of each other. So thanks, AJ.
Thank you. Bye.